The last call. The neon lights of Club Nocturne flickered, their glow barely cutting through the thick cigarette smoke that curled in the air. It was 2:30 a.m., almost closing time. The bass-heavy music had softened, signaling to the few lingering patrons that the night was coming to an end. Eddie, the bartender, wiped down the counter, his eyes flicking to the last customer slumped at the far end. The man had been there for hours, motionless, nursing the same glass of whiskey. His face was obscured by the shadows of his hood, but Eddie could see his lips moving, whispering something to himself. "Last call, buddy," Eddie said, forcing a smile. The man's head snapped up. His eyes, black as ink, no whites, locked onto Eddie's. A chill ran through him. The air seemed to grow thick, the music distant. The man slid his drink forward. "Another," he rasped. His voice was a whisper, yet it seemed to echo in Eddie's skull. "I think you've had enough," Eddie replied, his voice trembling. The man grinned. His teeth were too sharp. "You don't want to see what happens when I'm still thirsty." A shadow slithered up the man's arm, curling around the empty glass like smoke. The lights overhead dimmed and the room seemed to stretch, the exit impossibly far away. Eddie stepped back, heart pounding. He reached for his phone, but it was dead. The music had stopped. He turned to call for security, only to find that the bouncer, the DJ, and the last stragglers had all vanished. They were alone, or so he thought. Something moved in the reflections behind the bar. He looked at the mirror, his own terrified face staring back at him. But behind him, a dozen figures stood in the shadows, hollow-eyed, grinning. Their mouths dripped with something dark. The man at the counter chuckled. They were all here for last call, too. The shadows lunged. The club was silent by morning. The door was locked from the inside. No one ever saw Eddie again. But if you listen closely, just before Club Nocturne closes, you can still hear a whisper from the bar. Another. By Michael Obialu.